All right, Internet. We're going to make a new Flutter app today. I know it's been a while, but ready to do it. So I have just opened up a completely fresh Flutter project. The only thing I did was configure FVM, which is an optional thing you can do just to have a specific version. I'm using 3.3.9, which I believe is latest at the time of recording. Okay, so we're going to be making kind of like a health tracking app, essentially, for food. Really basic, and my goal with this, although usually I build applications that have a full server-side component and an API and all those sorts of things, this is something that's going to be a fully self-contained app. No internet required. Basically, everything is going to just be stored in a local database using something called Hive. And we're just going to kind of worry about things like state management and all that kind of stuff. So I'm going to start by just cleaning up the file that comes with this very quickly. We'll just get rid of some of these things. I'm also going to make our debug check banner mode to false, which just gets rid of this. You'll notice I'm actually running this as a Mac app. In kind of an iPhone-ish ratio, and that's just because I find the Mac app doesn't use as much memory. We're also just going to get rid of this, and we're going to eventually put something here. I'm just going to put a scaffold for now so it doesn't break, and we should have just a completely empty project now. Okay, so that gets rid of all that stuff. All right, next thing I want to do is install some packages that we're definitely going to want to use. So we will do this in terminal. And because I'm using FVM, Flutter Version Manager, I will prefix all my commands, my Flutter commands with FVM. But you wouldn't have to do that if you're not using FVM. You would just write it like Flutter pub get. But we would do FVM Flutter pub get in this project. And that's just because I have lots of different versions of using. I don't use the my system version of Flutter because I have different projects. Okay, so in order to install a few things, let's get Hive going. So we should just be able to go fvm flutter pub add Hive. I believe that's the name of the package. Yep. And that should get us our latest one. So now if we go to our pub spec, we should see somewhere in here. Hive, cool. We also want Riverpod, but I'm specifically going to get the Flutter Riverpod version. This is Riverpod, but we want, it's probably just Flutter underscore Riverpod. It is. And I believe that still installs that. There we go. There's going to be some other packages we're definitely going to need, but this should sort of get us off to the races. There's actually one more package I definitely want. It is called freezed. So yeah, we will add freezed. We're going to use this for just handling the data of our models. Okay, let's go here. Let's make a new folder called source. I'm not going to be worrying on this project about being super particular about the architecture, the clean architecture. But I am going to, sort of break this down in a logical sort of way. This is a very simple app. So I'm actually going to go for an approach where we actually in the source have models, we have components, we have screens perhaps, we're going to have providers, and we're going to have... that's probably all we'll need. Maybe there'll be one more. I usually have sort of like a feature-based approach. You'll see in some of my other videos where, inside source, I'd have a different thing for each module, essentially, and then these sort of folder structure in each. But I'm keeping this really, really simple. So we'll just do this. So let's go into our models. And the first thing we're going to want is we're going to make an item just called food.dart. Okay. And this will be where we store or the model that represents a food item, essentially. There's one more package I realize we do need, and let me just make sure this is freeze annotation. This package has nothing in it freeze. Cool. So we're going to add also this, and we're going to import that file. And this is going to be part of food.g.dart and also part of food dot food.freezed dart, which those files do not exist, and all that is fine. And we're going to be creating a model. So this model, because we're using freeze, we're going to annotate this. And freeze is just essentially a code generator, so you can kind of design your models and not have to write all the boilerplate code. So it's a little bit tedious to set up, but it all makes everything easier. So we'll call this food, and it's essentially going to have a mix-in of food, which this is something that's going to be generated by the freeze package. I forgot a D here. There we go. And all we really need to do is create a factory. Factory of food. It's a food factory. And in here we put all of our properties. So we're going to have an ID just to represent each one. It'll be of type integer. Let's also give it a name, and all these will be required. String, name. And what else are we going to want? We're going to essentially want to track a few different things on here. We're going to want to track, these are all going to be essentially integers. We're going to track the number of calories it has. Calories. I'm just going to copy this a few times because they're basically the same. Saturated fat, we'll just call it fat. Sugar. And protein. And those are all of our main things. We might decide we need more, but that's totally fine. And then we essentially make it equal to this. This is something that also gets generated. And then we're probably going to want a way to essentially create a food from JSON data. So we can create another factory. That'll be food.fromJSON, and we'd be passing in a map of it with string and dynamic. It can be strings, it can be integers, whatever. This will be the JSON, and this is what the JSON annotation package gives us. But they'll basically generate a thing called food from JSON, where you pass in the JSON. Okay, so we have lots of stuff here, a bunch of errors. So in order to actually run this, we need to run a little function here. So again, I'm prefacing this with FVM, but basically it's Flutter packages, pub, run, build runner, delete conflicting outputs. You can see the docs for that. And this will actually go and generate this. Now, I realize we need to obviously add this build runner package, so let's add that. And there might be one other configuration we have to do, but let's just see. And there it goes. It's starting to generate. Looking at this, I have a feeling I didn't save before I generated, so we might have to run this generator again, but that's totally fine. Cool. It almost worked. Let's save this file though, and let's run it again. Okay, we're one step closer. So we have this right here. It generated the freezed file for us, but it did not generate the generate this for some reason. We are this. I realize it's because there is one more package we need. JSON serializable. Then, if we rerun our build runner, I made the freeze.dart. And there we go. We have freezed and we have the g.dart. So we have this model that will have all the fun things in it, like copy with and just comparable sorts of things, as well as this lovely from JSON sort of thing. So that's one model. I'm going to copy this and we're going to make a new model, and this will be called entry. And we'll just rename a few things here. Actually, I'm going to Command D a few of these, entry, and these guys here, entry. Okay, so an entry is going to do a few things for us. We are going to still have an ID on it, sure, but instead it is going to have a reference to a food item. So we can import the food. We'll just call it food. And then we're also going to have a date time, and we could call this like entered at, like this. And we'll run that. And these are our main data models. We will make more, I'm sure, but this kind of deals with the core of this app. Okay, so let us get some things going on here. So I've installed Riverpod already. We're definitely going to want to make a provider for this. So we're going to call this, let's start with our food provider. It's a little bit simpler. And actually, let's call it a food list provider, because we might also have a detail provider, perhaps. Okay, so there's going to be various food lists throughout the app. So we're going to just start by making a food list type, which will be an enum, and we'll start by just saying all. But for instance, we could also have one for like search. We could have one for maybe like, we end up wanting to break our things into like things like dairy and whatnot. I'm just setting this up because we might want to have multiple lists, but we're just going to worry about them essentially being all right now. Okay, so this is going to be a Riverpod class. So we're going to call it food list provider, and it is going to extend state notifier. And this is a Riverpod package, and its model type is going to be a list of foods. Okay, and we need to import in food. All right, now we also want to, whenever we construct this, we're going to have a reference to what list type we're talking about. We'll just call that type. And in its constructor, whenever this gets instantiated, we're going to want to pass in the type as like the required parameter. And we'll optionally allow a list of foods to come with it. So list food, and we'll call this just initial. So we can pass it in. If we don't, we will just set a default of an empty list. And then we need to call the super on this and essentially pass in this initial object, which again, by default, will just be an empty list. So that'll set our state here to an empty list of things. Okay, then what we can do is have let's have a list function, and this is essentially going to return set the state of this list equal to something that we're going to do shortly. Right now we'll just do an empty array and put a to do here. Okay, then in order to actually access this, we will create something accessible. So final, we'll call this food list provider, basically the same name but lowercase or camel case. And it is going to be equal to a state notifier provider. And inside here, we're actually going to use a family, because in theory, we can have different lists and not have to keep refreshing them. So we just denote it with family. And the first parameter is the name of the reference to the provider's class. The second is what actually is stored in it, which is this list of food. And the third is actually what might make each family different. And we'll do that. Food list type. Then when we construct it, we have access to the ref, and we also have access, we get that type. And we essentially then want to construct a food list provider with type as the first parameter. All right, one other thing I'm going to do is also have access to a ref. And we'll actually make this the first parameter. And this is just in case we ever want this provider to actually speak to other providers. We can pass the ref in. And since we have that ref here, it's really easy to do. We just pass that as the first parameter. So now anywhere in this code, we can go ref.read, ref.watch, although you wouldn't really want to watch in one of these providers, but we'll essentially have access to other things. Awesome. Now, in order to actually work with this, let's make a screen. We'll just call it food list screen.dart, and we'll just make a stateless component or stateless widget, and we'll call this food list screen. And what we'll return is just like to import this properly. There we go. We're going to return a scaffold, and its app bar will be an app bar, where its title will be food or something. It needs to be a text object, food, and this can be a const for now. And then its body is something we're going to do. Now, rather than putting the list in here, let's actually make a new component called foodList.dart. This will also be a stateless widget called foodList. Get rid of these guys because the import's so annoying in VS Code. And instead of extending stateless widget, we're going to extend consumer widget, which is Riverpod's version of a stateless widget. And in here, we have to just pass in, in the consumer widget, there's one more piece, and it's the ref. Now we have access to ref in this widget. Okay, so in here, what we can do now is we can get access to the foods, and that will be equal to ref.watch food list provider. Now we do, because we need a family, because as a family, we're going to pass this in, so we do food list type.all. Okay, so then we have access to that. So then in here we can return a list view dot builder, and it's going to have an item builder with context and index, and we need to make sure we have the item count will be foods dot length, and within here we know the food itself is going to be equal to foods at that index. Then we're going to return for now just some text with food.name. Notice how it knows this is a food, and it knows that there's a name. And in our food list screen, we're going to pull in that food list. Not food list screen, but food list. Now, let's do something a little fancy here. We're going to make a food list type, and we'll just call it type. And we're going to require this dot type to be passed in. And then instead of using all, we can actually just get type. That way we can reuse this component for multiple food lists. So now here we would have to do type food list type dot all. And we can make this a const. All right, so now if I refresh, you will notice nothing different. And that's because our food list provider really doesn't have anything in it. So let's actually just temporarily hydrate this. So I'm just going to change this to instead of a arrow function, we're just going to go like this and return this, just basically what the arrow does. That way we can just easily kind of make something called foods, and let's just equal it to, we're going to construct temporarily a new food item, giving it a name of test food, and let's have more fun, banana. We'll give it an ID, an ID of 1. Now there's a bunch of other parameters we need, and I think if we're lucky, we can go like this and go quick fix. I thought it would let me just do all of them. There must be a way, right? Okay, we'll just figure it out then. Calories, 100, fat, 150. Obviously these numbers are not correct. Protein, 200. And what else are we missing? Probably one more thing. Sugar, 100. This is a pretty awesome banana. And that shouldn't be like that. And actually, then let's just copy this and make something called apple. And maybe we'll make an apple that's 200 calories. That way here, as that optional parameter, which is a list of foods, we can go like this. And now I will just rebuild. And Right. Wait. Initial items. This should be where. Oh. Okay. One very important thing in the main.dart, we are just returning an empty scaffold. Here we want to, for now, just do the food list screen. And lastly, what I'm going to do is wrap my material app in, I think it's a builder I would want to use here. Eventually, we basically have to wrap this in provider scope. Okay, so it's not actually a builder. We're just going to wrap in a widget, wrap with widget, something called provider scope. And this basically is just required for Riverpod so that everything can have this scope. There we go. So we have our banana and we have our apple and everything is great. Okay. Now, what would we want to do next? Well, I think since we are hard coding these in, it probably makes sense to have a form to create these. However, I think before that, we should figure out our data storage solution. So I want to be using Hive for this, which I have open somewhere in here. I'm just going to re-find it. And yeah, Hive is essentially like a local database we can use, no SQL database, so it's very much like Firebase and stuff like that, but we don't even have to worry about having internet, which is kind of cool. Like this app's just going to work fully offline. All right, so the way I want to work with this is we are going to have some collections. So I want to figure out a really good way to keep this organized. So let's make a, I'm going to make a new folder called services, and we're going to make a new file, and we'll call this food service.dart. And so this will be a class, it'll be called food service, and it's not going to inherit anything at this point, although we probably will at some point. So our food service is essentially going to be mostly a static class. Actually, food service. So we're going to have a few methods in here to essentially talk to our state. So I'm going to just make a, actually this can probably be a const, and we can call this collection name, and we're going to just equal it to food. Static const collection name food. Perfect. Okay, now looking at this, we're going to want a way to get our data and all that kind of stuff. So let's just make one called, we'll just start with list, and it will be a future, and it's going to return something. I'm just going to make it dynamic for now. And it's an async function. All right. Now they have, okay, so they have the word create a box collection, open your boxes. Okay, so maybe really box is what this would be called, box name. So I guess a collection is, the box is kind of the model itself, and the collection is the whole database essentially. Okay, cool. So what we can do is because these are not async, are they? Oh no, they are still. Okay, so let's just start. We'll do it in here. We'll find a good way to break this up. So I'm just gonna copy this, import in the things we'll need. Abstract classes cannot be instantiated. Okay, concat. Interesting. Hive cipher. Oh, this is just for encryption. Is this optional? Because we don't care about encryption right now. Okay, let's get rid of these comments. Names of your boxes. And we're gonna make a box called food. This will all get reorganized in a better way. I just want to get the basics sort of working. And yeah, the path can just be there. And we'll just call the name of this collection app. Okay, then we're just going to grab this and we're going to call this food box equals collection.openBox food. And let's just print out food box. That's all we'll do there, because we'll have to do some work into that. Then we're going to make a future, again, dynamic for now, and it's going to be called save. Save or create? Let's do create. And it's going to take a new food item. And in order to save, looking at this, put something in it. So we will wait. Yeah, that's the thing. Okay, collection. Yeah, so this is not the way to do this because there's a lot of duplication happening here. But I just want to kind of lay out the pieces and then we'll figure out the best way to architect this. So here we can go food box dot put. Is that what it is? Oh wait, to open box. Yeah, they say it's dot put. Doesn't seem to like that. Box is optional, give it a type. Put something in it. So obviously, the put does not work anymore. What else do they have? So like insert dot set. Their docs is out of date. Yeah, I figured it was something like that. You need to await the food. That means, can't I just do this? Yeah, I think that's the problem. We want to actually await this here too. Food box dot put. So there'll be a key and a value. So key is going to be the food.id, and the value, I guess, dot to string, and the value is going to be our food.toJSON. Basically, our freeze package creates a toJSON method for us that's going to automatically serialize the data. All right, cool. So we passed in a food and we create the food. Then we have this way to sort of get foods, which this is going to come back as a collection box of map data dynamic. So what we want to actually do is foodbox.getAll. What does the getAll want us to do? GetAll, list string of keys. Okay, that's not actually what we want. Foodbox.clear.getAllKeys.getAllValues. Let's do that. So that would return not the correct thing. So let's just make final items equal this. Then in theory, what we'd actually want to return is items.map. And what we want to do in that map is take the item, and we actually would want to go, because this should be a map. Yep, this is a map string dynamic. So then we would go food.fromJSON and pass in the item itself, and ultimately make this go back to a list. Items.map, there's something wrong here. Items.map. Oh, it's not actually, it's because it's not an array. I think we do item.entries, which now this will be the entry, and then it's actually going to be entry.value. Map dynamic. Okay. So in order to conform to this properly, So we'd be getting back. This is close. This is close. Okay, so what I've done is I'm going to pass in an object and create this from there. So we're the key and then the value. Okay, so we have a list. This probably won't quite work, but it'll get us close, I think. Okay, so what I want to try now is in our list provider. Actually, we won't be able to do it there. Let's go to our list screen, and we're going to just add a floating action button. Press will do something. Let's see if that guy shows up. And let's give it a child of icon, icons.add. Okay, so in this, obviously this is where we'd have a form or something, but for now we're going to make a new food item. And I'll just take that one from the list provider. And let's just make its ID 3 or something. And call this orange. There we got. Now we want to make this an async function because we're going to then take our food service dot create, and we'll pass in the F for food, and we'll await that. And let's just see if that actually goes into our database. Now let me just click plus, see if we get an error. Cool. Now we don't know if it's there because we don't really have a way to see it, right? So let's for now. I'm going to just comment out this code, and what we're going to do is go await food service dot list, and we're going to just items equal this. This is just temporary too, and let's print the items. And in our food service, when we list them, we are returning them, and this is probably where we'll get an error, but let's find out. There we go. Okay, unaccepted type null is not the subtype. All right, cool. Let us simplify this for a moment, and let's actually just return the items before they are like that. So now we actually have this. Cool. All right, so essentially what I want to be doing, I don't really care about this per se. So we get the items, and let's just make this really straightforward for now. Final. Or let's do for final item in this. Of course you can't do that. Actually, I think you can if you put this around. No, I didn't think so. So we'll just do for item in items. Oh, because it's not, yeah, it's we have to do the entries. Okay, so then we have K, which is really the ID, equals item, and actually, yeah, we can call this entry now. Entry dot key, final V equals entry dot value. Then essentially we'd be creating a food item here. Now I think what we could do is make data equal to, and we can just go ID, oops. And I think K is a string. So I think actually something that's going to solve a lot of these problems is let's make this a string as well here. And we'll rerun our build. Because based on this coming back, I guess it can, I'm assuming that's the ID, and I believe it must be a string, even though it doesn't look like it in the output, but that's just because this isn't actually JSON, it's just Dart figuring it out. So then, yeah, we can have ID equal to K. Then we can basically take, because I just want to be able to use this guy's ID as the ID of the food. So really, okay, what we can actually do is V, we can basically spread V, but then set its ID equal to K. So that's the data that we actually want, and then really what we are returning from it is this right here. And instead of passing that in, we're actually going to pass in data. And what we need to do is say that this is a map string dynamic data equals that. And then we essentially return the food. So we're going to make a list of food, call it foods, and we go foods.add food, and we can make this a little bit. Oh, I didn't initialize it. We have to initialize an empty array. So we'll just do that. Then just to kind of clean this up, we're going to replace K with this. We're going to take that. We can get rid of these guys. All right. And then what we would return is foods. And now these guys are obviously complaining because these are now strings. So let's just do that or whatever, even though we won't be using this for much longer. Okay, back to our food list screen. This button should print out our thing. So yep, we have an array of foods. And if we were to go back to our food list screen and actually go like this, and let's make the ID 4 or whatever, banana, and get rid of this, add that, then put this back how it was. We now have the 2 foods in there. Amazing. Okay, so we have a bit of a database, working with our database now. Okay, so there's some duplication in here. We have this sort of collection stuff, and we have, creating. We don't have anything for updating yet, but we would get there. But this is fine. This is fine for now. We will find a way to basically get rid of this duplication. Actually, let's do a couple things here. First of all, this is going to return a list of food right here. This is just going to return bool, and what we'll do is we're going to wrap it in a try and a catch. If there's an error, we'll print the error, and we'll return false. That way we know either it turns true if it worked or false if it didn't. And then, yeah, let's make a, this will return basically something like this. Actually, no, what we want is the collection. So I'm going to make this, it'll be a future collection, and we'll call it get box. It's async. And we'll take that. Return food box. Okay, then food box is actually going to, we'll just call it box moving forward. Box is going to equal to await get box. Beautiful. And then this will be box. And then that means here we can do the same thing. I can basically just take this line and go like this. And let's call this box again. Box.put, and items equal that, get values. Yep, that makes sense. Cool. Now, what I would like to do is make something like this called box name, and we will use that value here and here. Then over here, we will use box name. And in this case, we are using, you know, if I reference this, is actually using this right here. And same with here, box name. And the reason I want to do this is I want to move this. We're going to make something called base service.dart. And class base service. And we will essentially have this one function in it so far. And we'll just call this box instead of food box. Box name, awesome. And what we can do here now is extend base service. So now this has access to everything that base service does. So we have this one thing here, and this isn't specific to food anymore. It allows us to pass in a box name. So this is a little bit simpler now. All right, the next thing we want to do is actually have this data, which we're kind of just pumping in here. We need it to actually be dynamic. So what I'm going to actually do in our provider is make a function called set, and it's going to take a list of foods. We'll call it foods, and all this is going to do is state equals foods. Actually, no, this is, we're actually going to do this differently. Okay, we're going to have a initialize function here, okay? And it is going to be async. And what I want to do is whenever this gets initialized, we're actually going to call the init function, okay? So instead of state equal to this is where we would use our final items equal, and we can use now our food service dot list, and we want to make sure we're awaiting this. And you'll see here, this is a list of foods, and then all we have to do is state equals items. Okay, so now when this gets initialized, it's actually going to go off and get those things from our database. And there they are, orange, which I know I spelled wrong, and banana. Cool. Then what we can have is a add function here, which takes the food. Now here we, or maybe I'll make this actually say append. And what we would basically do is go state equals, and we take whatever items we have right now, and we'd want to whatever the state is now, and actually pass in that one item. Therefore, in that add function that we were doing in the food list screen, let's get rid of this for a moment, and let's put this in, and just make this say anything, and let's make this say, we have orange, banana, let's put apple back in. And our create function, does it return anything? It does not, but that's okay, because we already have knowledge of this food. So we can also go ref dot, although I realize, yeah, this is not part of a, we do not have access to ref here. So we can just do that by making this a consumer widget instead, and then passing in widget ref. That way we can actually go ref.read, and this is just temporary anyway, so it's fine. Food list provider, and this would be food list type dot all, and we can do append. Sorry, then we have to go dot notifier, because we're not talking about the state, we're talking about it's the whole class, and then we can go append, and we can pass in f, which is this guy here. So we're kind of prematurely doing it, but this will at least give the user feedback that it was added. So now if I click add, we'll see apple there, and we'll actually see it many, many times. Okay, let's make this guy a lot prettier. So in our, let's make a new component. We'll call it food card.dart, and this will be a stateless widget, food card, and it's going to require us to pass in a food. And we'll make that the first parameter. And let's return just a list tile. And it was going to have a title of food.name. And then let's just start with that. Keep it really simple. And get rid of these guys here. And in our food list, which is this component here, instead of returning text, we're going to return the food card. And instead of passing in the name, we actually pass in the entire food. So now we have this cool thing here. And we can also do some other things. You know, we can give it a icons dot this food thing. Food bank, I have no idea what that looks like. Noise. Plate, I'm just looking for like something. Dinner dining. That's amazing. Let's just make it a star for now. Yay. Then in our subtitle, we're going to put text, and it's going to be food dot, and we'll just call it caption. That doesn't exist though on our food item. But what I was kind of thinking is we can have a string getter called caption, and this essentially will return a string with some of the things. So we can actually put calories. Let's just start with that. And context caption is defined here. Something did not restart properly. String get caption. Return calories. Yep, this should be working. Unless that's for some reason not being stored. Let's just rebuild. Yeah, what is this? It might just be, you know what, this is probably just, we made a change to the model and didn't run this builder, which I didn't know was required for these custom things, but I guess it makes sense. Oh, wow. Oh, all right, I have run into this before. I believe this is the reason for it. We need to denote a const of food dot da, da, da. It's just this little line like this. And this allows us to kind of have our own custom methods. I forget the real reasoning behind it, but it should solve this problem. Okay, we're good now. And if we actually rebuild, we see, yeah. Okay, cool. So now what is the short form for calories? Calorie. What is like the calorie can be used to qualify energy. Its unit abbreviation is cal. So we could do like that many cals. We can do the fat, like basically we could like decide what we kind of wanted to show here. Yay. And in theory, if we click this again, we'll just get that new guy there. All right. Now let's work on the ability to essentially delete one of these things. So in our let's go to our food list. So what I want to do here is wrap this in a dismissible. And key is required. Key, and we put in key, and we can use the food.id as it. And then this should let us kind of do this draggy thing. Behind this, though, let's wrap this in a widget container, color, colors dot red, red dot shade 400. Let's just see what that looks like. Cool. Now that means our food card we'll need to wrap in a different color so that we don't see this underneath it. So let's just wrap that in a container with a color, colors.white. And that way you can kind of see that there. And what we want to do is an on dismissed. In direction, we don't actually, because I'm only going to actually allow it to go one way, so I don't really care about the direction. And I think there's a way to dismiss direction dot end to start. So that will make it so you can't go to the right, but you can go that way. Cool. Then we want to do on dismissed, and let's just make sure this works. Test. Back to my debug console and dismiss it. Oops, dismiss it. Yay! Look, test. Okay, so now what we want to do is essentially delete this thing. So we'll use our food service dot delete, and we'll pass in our food item. Actually, let's just pass in the ID. This doesn't exist yet. Let's make it. And we're going to just take this the same function here, and it will be called delete, and instead we're going to pass in a string of the ID, and then it's box dot, I'm assuming delete, and we pass in the key, which should just be the ID. Okay, cool. Dismissal is part of the tree, that's fine. And let's just make sure in our food list right here, we first of all await it. And we will also want to go ref.read food list provider. And we'll use whatever type this list is. .notifier.remove. And we'll do remove at. Actually, we'll do remove, and we'll pass in the same thing, food.id. Actually, let's do remove at. It's a little bit easier, and we'll pass in the index. Okay, so now in our food list provider, we're going to copy this, remove. We're going to be passing in an int index. Now, what I want to do is basically take the state but copy it, and then double it and go remove at index. And that should, why didn't that, remove at isn't defined for food list provider. Yes, it is. We just made it. Oh, I just didn't call it the right thing. Okay, got that, and we'll just do a refresh. And let's see, first of all, if I remove banana and then rebuild again. There we go. It got deleted from Hive, and it got deleted from here. Cool. Okay, next important thing, obviously, we need a way to add foods. Okay, so let's close some stuff. We're going to make a new thing called foodForm.dart, and it's going to be a stateless widget to start, food form. And just gonna get rid of these guys, go like this. But we are gonna make it a consumer widget because I love Riverpod. And with this, we are going to actually return we can start with a container, and I'm just gonna give it a child of text. Hi. It's beautiful. Then in our list screen, instead of doing this stuff, we are going to show modal bottom sheet. And its builder function takes parameter of context, which I spelled wrong. We're going to return the food form. And there we go. And we're going to just say is scroll control true, just in case our form gets really big. We want to make sure we can scroll it. Okay, let's see. So there we got this guy going. Awesome. Okay, so obviously our container, let's wrap the whole, first of all, let's make this is probably going to be like a column. So let's just wrap this in a column, and let's wrap this in a widget called safe area. Now, because this is technically a Mac app, oh, wow. Oh, right. Column, we need to also say main axis size dot min, so it doesn't try and take up all the room it can. And there we go. Now, I have this in the safe area because that's just like for iOS and stuff, you know, having it so that nothing goes in. Now, this is a Mac app, so the safe area is kind of like null, but it's a good thing to have. But I want, even on top of the safe area, let's just add some extra padding here, maybe like 16 pixels, just so that there's some room. Cool. And our column, cross-axis alignment dot start. And we can make this say new food, and it can just be a const for now. This is going to warn for now, but we're eventually going to have something that's dynamic. So new food, and we could of course style this. I'm not worried too much about style for this app right now, but let's give it a font weight of bold, and let's do a font size of something else, or instead of doing all this stuff, the real, proper way to do it would be theme.of.context.text_theme. I think there's like headline small. There we go. New food. Let's actually say add food. All right, cool. That's fine enough for me. Then in here we're going to want a text form field, and it's going to have a decoration of input decoration, and its label will be name. And we can const that. What? Oh, label. Sorry, label is a text field, a text called name. So now we should have a field in here. And because this is the first one, let's make it autofocus true, which will also pop up the keyboard when it's actually an iOS app, which is the intention for this. And we got a name. Then we're going to want a few more. But before I do that, what we're going to do is actually make a provider for this. And this will be called food form provider.dart. Okay. We're going to use Riverpod to manage the state of our form. So we'll call it food form provider extends state notifier. And it will be, instead of a list of foods like we did before, it's just going to be a single food. And we're going to want to have access to this ref thing. We're also going to want a global key for the form. So global key, form, state. This needs to be imported, I assume. We'll call it form key, and we'll just instantiate it right away. Boom. Then let's make some controllers. So we'll start with the name controller. This is a text editing controller. We'll call it name controller, and it's going to also be instantiated just as a text editing controller right here. There'll be some other controllers too, but we'll get to that. Then when we actually init this whole thing, we're going to want to pass in the ref, and we're going to want to pass in a food itself. And we'll call this, we'll just call this model. Okay, food, we imported. Then what we're going to do, we're going to make a function called load, and it's going to take an item called food, and essentially this is just going to set the state equal to that to start. And we're also going to take the name controller, name controller dot text, and set it to the food dot name. The other thing we're going to want is we're going to want to add some listeners to when stuff changes. So add listeners, And we're going to take our name controller and we're going to add a listener to it. And inside it, we're just going to basically set the state equal to state.copyWith name. That means when anything changes, name controller, name controller dot text. So anytime that changes, we'll be updating the state in memory of that food item. So that means in this function, we first of all want to call load, and then we can call add listeners. Add listeners. And this requires us to pass in the model itself. Okay, so that's kind of our main things. Let's also add a validator. So the way I like to do validators is we would essentially, this will return either a string or null. We'll call it name validator. And the thing that gets passed in is a string value. And here we would essentially, and I'll just do it this way, if value equals null, or value.isEmpty, we just want to return name is required or something like that. Otherwise, we return null. And this just keeps our logic outside. So basically the way we would do all this is I'm going to wrap this whole thing in a form, and its key is going to be that provider. So let's get access to the provider. Provider equals ref.read. So I'm just going to be reading the provider. And this is going to be a food form provider, which actually, sorry, I realize we haven't even set here. So let's make that final food form provider. It's going to be equal to state notifier provider, and it's of type food form provider, and its model is a food. And we get access to the ref, and what we want to return here is food form provider, passing in ref and passing in model, which we don't have that right now. So by default, what I want to pass in is what I would consider an empty food. And to do that, let's make another factory. Factory food.empty. And it's going to return a new food item with kind of just some defaults. So its name, for instance, its ID will just be like 0 or something. Its name will be just an empty string. Then we have things like calories. We'll just set to basically defaults. Sugar, 0, fat, 0, and protein, 0. That way here we can actually just pass in food.empty as sort of the default thing. The intention here is to allow the form not to just be used for creating things, but also editing existing ones. Okay, so then in our food form, which I just closed, let's make this bigger for a minute. Actually, we like to be able to see our app, right? So here we can go food form provider dot notifier. So we have access to the provider. I also want to have access to the food itself, and that'll be ref dot watch, so we can watch for changes. We might not even need this, and we can remove it after, but this is the food, and this is actually the provider. So what I can do is take this form and give it a key. What's the key? Provider dot form key. Then on the form field, we can add a controller. This will be provider dot name controller, and we can add a validator. Provider dot name validator. And because I conformed exactly to what a validator function is expecting, right here by having, it returns a string, returns a nullable string and has a nullable string as an entry point. We don't even have to call the function. We can just point it referencing. And let's save our food because that would have broke otherwise. Then there'll be some more fields we're going to be adding, but let's just maybe add a divider, and then let's add a elevated button. And on pressed, we'll get back to that. Child will be the text of, we'll just say create for now. And now we should have this create button here. And what we want to do for this on pressed is actually go provider.submit, which I know we have not made yet, but we will. So we'll do this right at the bottom. This will be a future, and maybe it returns a bool of a success. And so we can actually await this here. Actually, it's going to return a nullable bool. And the reason is what we'll do first is we'll go if not form key dot current context dot validate. Nope, it's current state dot validate. So if it doesn't, we actually going to return null. So this will either be true, false, or null. And essentially, if null means that it didn't, that there's a validation error. So we're just gonna, if this equals null, we're just gonna, return out of this thing without doing anything. But so yeah, we run that, and then this is where we would essentially, talk to our service to create it, etc. So let's just make sure this works. So now if I go add new food and it's empty, I should get an error, name required. If I don't, it actually works in theory. Okay, that's basically 1 hour into this thing, and check out the next video for where we will continue off.